Welcome to the Supply Chain Ambassador podcast. I'm your host, Bruno, helping you navigate the world of supply chain in a fun and engaging way. On today's podcast, I have with me Cedric Pilon. Cedric Pilon has spent the first 14 years of his public service career working in various procurement management roles in organizations such as Justice Canada, Canadian Heritage, the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat, Canada Border Services Agency, and the Fisheries and Oceans Canada. Shortly after joining Fisheries and Oceans Canada, Cedric joined the financial systems team responsible for implementing SAP S4 HANA at DFO and became the first director of the financial systems operating S4 HANA corporately within the Government of Canada. He is now the Accounting Operations Director at Fisheries and Oceans Canada, where the integration of procurement and payment via the procure-to-pay, P2P process, keeps him in touch with procurement. Welcome, Cedric.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Can you describe your journey to your current role for us? Give us more context.
Yeah, so I started my procurement career in the private sector. I was purchasing for a retail store. Shortly after, started as a PG2, Justice Canada. That was back in 2005. Was supported by two super strong PG5s. Shortly after, a couple of years after, around late 2007, moved to Canadian Heritage. I like to say it's the best kept secret in the federal government. Had amazing projects there. So I had the opportunity and the privilege to work on things like the World Expo in Shanghai back in 2010. I did some state funerals, supported the 2010 Olympic Games in Vancouver. Just amazing projects. Also tons of stuff surrounding culture, like the Junos, for instance. It really built my confidence because at that stage in my career, I really had to learn about the carve-outs and the trade agreements when they applied. So my technical proficiency really expanded at that time. I became a PG6, so a manager at Treasury Board Secretariat a few years after. It was a great opportunity. I had a very supportive ADM, Christine Walker, who retired a few years ago. And she was very supportive and allowed us to introduce a lot of tools, a lot of automation. We streamlined the contracting initiation process at that time using technology. We had tools to manage the workload of our officers. So it was a little bit ahead of its time, I would say. Also a great opportunity at that time was that TBS had their own legal services to review Treasury Board submissions. And I happened to connect with a lawyer that was just fantastic in sharing her legal knowledge of the procurement framework. So again, really built my technical proficiency in terms of policies, trade agreements, and then the legal framework above and beyond all of that. And shortly after, CBSA, Acting Director, Material Management. So I had our fleet at CBSA, and also obviously procurement, but in a director role at that time. First experience a truly decentralized and operational department, which does bring its own challenges and its own reality, which again allowed me to expand my knowledge and how I looked at procurement as being able to support projects. Joined the DFO back in 2018 as the PG6, the manager there. And we had this great project of implementing SAP that really allowed me to connect so many dots, really forge how I still see procurement today and all those integrations. And then I was in that role for roughly 3 years. And the last 3 years, I've been doing the accounting operations, so accounts payable, looking at all sorts of risks. So it's been quite a journey, and procurement has exposed me, and I do think procurement has helped me a lot along the lines in getting where I am today.
And sounds to me, too, like you had a number of mentors that also shared their knowledge and helped you along the way.
Absolutely key for anybody who wants to learn and progress. You need those people that are looking to give back, that see something in you and will support you. So absolutely key in my journey, 100%.
Wow. What would you say you love about what you do currently?
So listen, not only currently, but what I've loved so far in my 21 years is there's always something to learn. Government is so big. There's so many pieces to deliver. So I think I referred to it insatiable learning source, right? So it is through in my current role. It was through in my procurement career. In procurement, my experience was that early on, just understanding contracting policy, understanding authorities, right? Why did we have different delegations for purchasing goods versus services, or just that early piece, right? That first year, trying to understand that. That was actually my source of learning that really some people used to have a good laugh at me, but I've read the contracting policy back when it was the authoritative source quite a few times at different stages in my career. Like, I really thought that was important, and every time I read it, I learned something more. I think I mentioned earlier when I moved to Canadian Heritage, procuring stuff internationally. How do these trade agreements apply when you're in China, in Shanghai, trying to get deals done for your restaurant at the Canada Pavilion? After the policy, I had them fairly down, right? Looking at trade agreements and all sorts of carve-outs that are built in there that if you're just doing your standard procurement, maybe you never have to look at those. But I was put in a position where I really had to dig, talk with legal services, right? Make sure my interpretation was correct. So that was another step in my learning journey that I really appreciated. After a while, when you feel like that was my TBS days, I would say, like I had the legal piece down as well at that stage. It was basically giving back was where I really appreciated. So me and my colleague Claude at the time had actually set up a knowledge exchange forum where we would sit with our teams, right, and share, go over terms and conditions, general conditions, different approaches to building statement of work. It was seeing kind of those light bulb moments for our employees and our colleagues, right? Of, oh, I see what you're saying. That, oh, I could actually use this. So that was a way of learning through exchange, but also giving back that I really appreciated. As I evolved into more the executive ranks, my work, like with the procurement officers, like I had really good people doing that already. So that ability to work and have those light bulb moments actually happen with colleagues across the organization. I think everybody has a sense that things are a little bit easier than they actually are when they're not in the specific business line. And I think procurement is a victim of that, where from a client's perspective, every once in a while, they don't appreciate the challenges and the maze perhaps that we have to navigate. So working with clients, explaining to them, listen, we have to do this. The advice my officers gave you is really good. And then educating the clients at senior levels was another thing that really got me excited about the position I was in.
Wow. Yes, it's certainly like navigating a maze, I would say, the world of procurement, especially for you when you touched on international procurement or heritage procurement. I can't only imagine the different rule sets that has compared to the standard procurement. So that's very interesting. Now, are there any misconceptions about what you do, common misconceptions?
Yeah, so I've alluded to it, but I would say the complexity, and we're all guilty of it, right? Every internal services provider, whether you be in communications, whether you're in procurement, whether you're in finance, I think there is a tendency for everyone to underestimate all the framework that is in place to guide each business lines, right? I've worked in procurement, I've worked in financial systems, I've worked now in accounting operations, and for each and every one of those lines, there are challenges, there are considerations that I'll say the common client that we all support is not aware of. So I think managing those is that misconception that it's easy and what are we doing has been something. For procurement specifically, I'll say my pet peeve misconception, I've worked in line departments. So I've never been in those big procurement bodies like PSPC or D&D that have ADMs of procurement. In line departments, most of the procurement functions end up reporting to the chief financial officer, the CFO at some point. And I've heard quite a few times over my career that procurement officers did not feel supported by CFOs when it came to procurement decisions. And it's something that I do not identify with. Having had the opportunity, especially later stages of my career, to work with multiple CFOs, most of them actually care quite a bit about their procurement function. I think what gets lost, or part of the misconception, is that they have operational realities in the procurement process that their colleagues are looking to deliver on. There are financial risks that are associated with procurements as well, right? So from a pure simple math, it's 2 against 1, right? And you have 2 considerations, and your procurement consideration is 1. So it needs to be an absolutely dangerous procurement consideration to override the other 2. And I've seen many CFOs put a pin into kind of various discussions or approaches that were being considered by colleague ADM. So for me, it's important that procurement officers understand that they matter, they support, their advice is heard, but At the same time, CFOs also have other considerations that they're trying to balance out.
Wow. And having your experience, having your accounting experience, your financial experience, your procurement experience, you have that perspective from all sides. And I think that is a great
I'd like
thing.
to think so.
Yeah.
It does help, right? So if people are struggling with a perception they're not supported, I would invite them to try and consider different angles, because usually, like, I think most of us have that ability that if you consider enough things, you can land that, yes, this decision makes sense, all things considered, right?
I love that. I love that kind of deductive reasoning when you can put all the considerations, then really your choices are limited to, there's only amount of choices that are most likely the correct choices. Right?
Absolutely. And when the going gets tough, there's rarely, if ever, a perfect decision, right? There's a reason these items are being challenged, flagged, brought up to senior management, right? Like the really easy stuff never makes it to the CFO.
Now, has there been any challenges that you've faced, and how did you overcome them? Today's episode was brought to you by Workaway Offices, Ottawa's premier flexible workspace provider. Their beautifully designed facilities offer everything from co-working, desks, and private offices to fully managed executive suites, along with meeting rooms, virtual business addresses, and more. It's everything a professional needs under one roof. Whether you're a freelancer, a startup founder, or a remote worker, Workaway Offices makes work fun and flexible. So visit Workaway Offices to book a tour and learn more.
Yeah, as I believe most of your listeners will relate to, procurement in a public space is always challenging, right? We're dealing with funding that belongs to our fellow Canadians. There are a lot of compliance items along the way that we need to do, education, right? Scientists, operations people that want a specific tool item that will help them deliver, right? They're like, why don't you help me procure this? It'll help me. So I think overall, just the nature of public procurement is a challenge in itself. So for me, what I tried to do when faced with those challenges, right, is bring value to what we do. I think I've told many officers over my career, you are not just a check in the box, right? If your clients see you that way, if that's all you're going to be, then yeah, interactions with clients will get challenging, right? And it will be a little bit more adversarial. Whereas if, they see value in what you do, you're able to educate, to support them, that then you get your clients to think about you and consider and see the way you need to attack different procurement files. And I think ultimately, one thing that captures that for me is procurement officers, I remember, will get, I'll say, mildly irritated if clients would call for small procurements that was within the client's delegation. They're like, you can do it. You don't need to call me. Whereas for me, that was the greatest sign of respect, right? You had a client who valued your opinion, your thoughts, what you brought, and they wanted your kind of support, right? Make sure they were doing the right thing. And is there a better way of doing this? So I think adding value to your procurement files, to how you deliver to clients, is the way to work around those challenges.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think even with my procurement files, or now I'm more of an advisory role, but I help a lot of my fellow colleagues when they're in their procurement files. And it's those touch points that we have with our clients are so important, right? Because we get to align, we get to learn and discover, because as procurement officers, we don't know everything. They're the technical experts. They're supposed to help us understand, and we're supposed to help them understand our procurement process. And I really loved the point you made about they don't see our world. So sharing that with them, whether it is the process, or even more importantly, the struggles that we are having in procurement, right? It's if we share that, they now understand the challenges that we have, right? And they'll fully support us in overcoming that. And I think it's a sign of respect to each other. It's a sign of collaboration. And all my procurement files that I've worked together with the clients, I think, have been really successful. They're not always it's not always a happy, clear runway. Sometimes there is ups and downs, but I think maintaining that respect with them and really just being open and transparent about what you're all dealing through creates a better atmosphere.
100%. It's a partnership, right? And we're all trying to achieve something, and there is a framework around what we can and can't do, right? So I think, again, my experiences have been tremendously positive dealing with clients. But yeah, you're right. I think you have to think of it as a partnership.
All right. Now moving on to more exciting things. Anything at your work that you're doing that's exciting and fun?
Yeah, so Fisheries and Oceans was home to Canadian Coast Guard up until September 2nd of 2025. So still very recent, right? Only a few months in. So it is very great learning experience again, right? To have an institution like the Canadian Coast Guard who has moved legally to the Department of National Defense now. I'll let you and your listeners dabble with some of the challenges that come with that, but everything is still in DFO's financial system. Obviously, the Canadian Coast Guard has not physically moved, right? So there is the legal reality that they now are accountable to the Minister of Department of National Defense. However, administratively, they are still very much intertwined with DFO. So a lot of what I've been doing this fall has been figuring out the way forward for that. And it doesn't happen that often in government that we have these big splits. So it has been a great learning experience. Just to give the listeners an example, we do have a procurement from D&D, a chart from the legal framework. Their minister has signed that, but all of their procurement is still being done in DFO's financial system. So their POs are all still captured on our side. Lots of challenges, lots of great learning opportunities.
They certainly have the right person to steer forward that challenge.
I am curious. Yes, I've been reading things I haven't read in years.
Now, what advice would you have to procurement officers?
Yeah, obviously, I think it's influenced by my background. I do learning. So my advice to any officer is be curious, right? I've worked in financial systems. I've seen the integrations between your payments, your project management, your procurement, our piece of that. Obviously, we, like all of us in line departments, work in highly integrated financial and procurement systems. I think the vast majority of us operate on SAP now, which is super integrated. I do find there is a bit of a disconnect in terms of when we go through our learning curriculums as procurement officers. It seems very black and white. It is very legalistic approach, right? And we need that. We 100% as an entity within the government Canada, we need that 100%. What I believe, what my experience, my journey has been is that you do reach a point where, you do know the policies, you do know the trade agreements, you do know laws that govern procurement, right? You read procurement ombudsman reports, you learn about best practices and all of that. So I do think at some point your knowledge is set. You have the knowledge, right? And that's when people reach that stage of their career. I think that's where you look at that integration piece, right? You try and learn about what is finance doing? Right? What is material management doing? What is this coding segment in SAP or in Oracle Financials for those still using Oracle, right? What does it mean? Why is it there? There isn't much that is there for no good reason, right? Being curious, learning all of that, I think in the end, it allows you to be that connector, right? And the system works in an integrated fashion, yet we still work very much in like a function base, right? You have your procurement people talking to clients. You have your finance people talking to your clients. You have your material management talking to clients about, hey, is this project done? Is this asset ready to be placed in service? You have your accounting folks that talk, right, about the depreciation. But amongst us, all of us, I feel like sometimes that's the integration piece is not what it could be. So I would say be curious, be that integrator, learn, and it'll help you tremendously to grow.
Integration. It's so important. From my experience, when I worked from a larger department to a smaller, the smaller gave me the ability to touch on those different integration pieces, see things from the client side, see a little bit on the payment side, what that looks like. And you're right, it's so important when you understand not just your procurement function, but how does it bleed out into the other functions? What do they need as the precursors to then kickstart their processes? What do they look for? And if you can anticipate all of this, it just makes your procurement so much better and smoother.
Goes back to the value you bring for an organization, right? If everybody knows, and again, you're that integration, you become an asset. You have knowledge. You're an integrator. Your clients, your colleagues value you. And then you can really help your clients sometimes deliver on things that they are not even able to foresee, right? Our clients are going through the same learning curves that we are in the procurement community, right? They're not always, you mentioned earlier, they're the technical experts. Some of them sometimes are very early in that stage, right? So us having the ability to poke them, hey, what are you guys doing for after? If you talk to material management, like this will be an asset, right? So there's a lot of value, again, that we can bring by being curious and acquiring that knowledge ourselves.
Fantastic. Is there any call to action for our listeners?
I do. Obviously, I'm tainted. I've been in finance for a few years now, but certainly even going back to my procurement days, integration with finance is key. I think usually the gateway for finance for people in procurement are those financial management advisors, so the FMAs. So I've met quite a few FMAs that are curious about procurement. So those CPAs, those accountants, right? It exists next to them, but it's also a different beast, right? I would just say try and find one for those of you that are ready, that have pretty much acquired the knowledge, right? Time to be curious, look horizontally, find an FMA, find a financial management advisor, and exchange with them because they're curious, right? Because the way our procurements unfold impacts the forecast that they have on how much our clients are going to spend at the end of the year, right? So do make friends with an FMA. Teach them about procurement, your reality, and ask those FMAs to do the same and teach you finance. Again, back to the integration, working as one team. I can guarantee you for those that are in line departments, that ability to understand those two sides is very valued by all.
Wow. Excellent. That's a very good call to action. And you've answered all my questions. I'm really happy and excited that you were able to share and bring this knowledge. Is there any comments or question you'd like to leave off on?
Just great for you for doing this. I think one thing I do miss about procurement is that community feeling is super prevalent. I think what you do here, having people come and share their experiences, their considerations for the procurement community, just reinforces that. And I think it's absolutely great. So on behalf of the entire community, thank you for doing that.
Thank you. The pleasure is all mine for having you come to share. You've heard it from the best, Cedric Pilon, giving you very wonderful insights from not only sharing his journey to his current role, but giving you very tangible procurement advice and call to action. And we're so happy that and thrilled that we had him on this podcast today. Please continue to like, share this amongst your colleagues so that we may grow the community and have more wonderful guests such as Cedric on the podcast. With that said, we've come to the close. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you at the next podcast. Thank you, and bye-bye.